with that said, thank you all very much for joining us this morning. These are rather intriguing and, shall we say, tranquil times in global politics. After all, there's only a couple of wars going on and, of course, a rivalry between great powers. But setting that aside, it's largely serene and very peaceful, right? That is not the case. But with that said, what I'd like to do is I'd love to invite each and every one of you to share with us in a room, what exactly are you working on right now and what excites you about your current work? And also tell us a bit more about yourselves as a warm-up round of introductions. And then afterwards, we'll launch straight into the conversation and the meat of the panel today. So on that note, may I invite my friend Dee to commence the discussion. Over to you, Dee.
Good morning, everybody. So as Brian said, I'm Dee Poon. I very simply normally just say I sell shirts. My family has a long legacy in community building through industry. Perhaps that might be the best way of saying it. Starting in Shanghai in the 1920s when my great-grandfather, who was a Boxer Rebellion indemnity scholar, went back to Shanghai and realized that the way he would be able to build and grow the nation was through a silk business that he married into. So this belief that industry is transformative and a part of the story of development and betterment of a country is something that we as a family hold very deeply. As Brian says, I am very involved right now mainly in arts and culture and mental health because I think within all of the chaos that is the contemporary world, trying to understand how we find a new normal, and even if this new normal is nothing more than just chaos in perpetuity, the two things we must leverage to move forward is humanity, which we will understand better through arts and culture and through the stories we can bring out about each other, and also by having a basic level of resilience and the ability to control or at least affect positively our minds so that we can go forward with strength. So that's a little bit about me. I pass on.
Thank you very much, Dee, for that. And speaking of the idea of a new normal, obviously navigating flux and the tumultuous changes in politics, in governance, in economic trends and patterns of consumers. These are all critical imperatives for folks operating in environments of flux. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Jesse. You're running an incredibly prominent business group in a rapidly burgeoning economy, Vietnam, which many has compared with China, and it's obviously got a population of nearly 100 million. It's frankly a sizable market in its own right in Southeast Asia. So I was wondering, can you tell us a bit more about what you're working on and what excites you?
Okay, so thank you, Brian, and thank you, Regina, for hosting this forum. So for our Sunwah group, we established in 1957. We're a Hong Kong company, but for me, I'm the regional director of Southeast Asia for Sunwah. So we're mainly in Vietnam and also Cambodia. So I'm based in Ho Chi Minh City, and we've been there for since 1970. So as you may know, Vietnam have their unification in 1975. So we actually experienced all the history, most of the history of Vietnam. And for us, we started with seafood. As you may know, we have cold storage in Tuen Mun, and we have sourced our seafood from Japan to all the coastal cities, including Vietnam, Cambodia, and Korea, and Canada, etc. So for me in Vietnam, we do real estate. We have a fund management company, Vina Capital, which is managing 4 billion assets. And also we do coffee and of course seafood and also innovation. So this is our 5 core business, although our main business is in China and headquartered in Hong Kong. So aside from business, we also try to act as a super connector. And how to do the super connector is not just through business and profit. My chairman also, my father, he also wants to build 10 cultural centers before he retired, because it's only arts and culture, this kind of connection would allow businesses to understand each other, people to understand each other, and therefore business may thrive. So that's why we built our cultural center in the University of Hanoi, the National University in Hanoi, is for more Chinese culture and Chinese learning and Confucianism, because both the Vietnam and China, they both have the common in Confucianism. So that's why we want to bridge the gap between the differences between two countries, and through culture. That's how we do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesse. And indeed, the 2 points I wanted to pick up on in your introduction, the first being the importance of Confucianism as an undergirding culture and a pillar of civil society, not just in Vietnam and China, but also in Korea. And this is often, there's a portrayal of these countries as the so-called chopstick nations, so to speak, that are underpinned by similar values, similar traditions, and some would posit, therefore there's room for more collaboration and conversations between the peoples of these countries. And secondly, you highlighted the role again of arts and culture, which I'd like to pick the brains of Melvyn on, actually, because Myanmar is a very culturally, ethnically, and also historically rich country, robust and diverse ethnicities in a moment. But the bridging function of arts and culture is indeed a topic that we're going to return to later on in conversation today. So before then, I'd like to pass the floor over to Melvyn to tell us a bit more about your work. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. So my name is Melvyn Pun. I'm a homegrown local Hong Kong person, but I do business in Myanmar. We run a reasonably sized conglomerate in Myanmar. We're the leading residential developer there. We have a bank. We have one of the leading e-wallets, but also hospital. We have the largest restaurant chain as well. So a number of different businesses in Myanmar, which is in itself a very difficult and interesting story. For those who don't know, Myanmar was probably the richest country in Southeast Asia in the 50s and 60s. We had a very good education system. We were known as the rice bowl of the world because we were exporting a lot of rice. But fast forward to today, unfortunately, we're one of the poorest in the world. We went through 50 years of military dictatorship. We had 5 to 10 years of democracy, which was the years that was growing very well from 2011 onwards. And then, unfortunately, we had a military coup again. So we've gone through a lot of ups and downs. But throughout this time, and in particular, since I returned back 12 years ago, being somewhat in awe of this overall fast development in the country, for me, it's quite interesting to see the impact of business on daily life, the livelihood, and also on kind of the country's development. In the last 3 years, all of us have gone through very difficult times, but I think probably very few would rival the difficulties in Myanmar. And it's amazing to see the resilience of people in country in very, very difficult times. From a business perspective, I would also say that there's a big differentiation between businesses that are purpose-driven, who are caring of the people and are caring of society, versus a lot of others who are there to make money, be a mercenary. And I think in times of change, which we are seeing increasingly now, that really makes a big difference. So that's a quick story for me.
Thank you very much, Melvyn. And of course, speaking of resilience and the emancipatory potential of the people, the largest economy in ASEAN by far, and also the largest in population today is Indonesia, which is this fantastic, vibrant, in many ways, flourishing democracy with its own challenges, its own difficulties, but also with a drive and a push to becoming a leading power in ASEAN and Asia, if not eventually indeed a sizable regional presence in the world at large. And that's why, Patrick, my question to you is, could you tell us a bit more about not just yourself, but also where you see Indonesia going? What's the prognosis and trajectory for the country?
First of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be considered young again. Hong Kong is a special place for me. Just a little bit of an introduction. I was born and grew up in Indonesia. My grandparents immigrated from Jiangsu province before the war as Chinese teachers. My grandfather was a high school principal. My grandmother had her own Chinese kindergarten. And I was summer intern in Hong Kong for 2 summers. I worked here. I still work with a lot of Hong Kong companies. I drew a lot of inspiration from this amazing place. And recently I work a lot more with Chinese companies. And I would say that they are a few notches ahead of you guys. Not to say that Hong Kong has lost its relevance. It's just that, from my experience, the Chinese companies have really, brought the game to a few notches higher. I started my career as a private equity investor, and then we are also a venture capitalist. And about a year ago, one of my portfolio company called Gojek Tokopedia asked me to step in to take over as CEO of the company. So just a little bit of a background. We are a merger of the largest ride-hailing company in Indonesia with the biggest e-wallet payment company called GoPay. So Gojek, GoPay, and then we merged with Tokopedia, which was the second largest e-commerce company. And in December last year, we merged our e-commerce business with TikTok Shop. So we are now partner of TikTok in Indonesia. I think I am privileged, not because the business sides, but the fact that our business actually connects millions of people in the bottom of the pyramid with opportunities, right? In our ride-hailing business, for those who are not familiar with Gojek, we are primarily a two-wheel company. So we have 2.6 million registered drivers on our platform. And because I was the first investor in Gojek, I could proudly say that we were the pioneer in this sector, and our competition came. I think their size is also in the millions. So I would say that our innovation had created millions of jobs opportunities for people who would otherwise not able to capture it. And we also connected with millions of merchants, different merchants, in whether it's our food delivery service called GoFood or our e-commerce businesses. And in our business model, because we are primarily mass market, we really have to think about how can we best serve this segment of the population, right? And it is interesting, it is challenging, it is a growing economy. Having said that, we still see that at the end, the purchasing power is still limited. There's still room to grow, but it's still today very limited. And I think if you talk about challenges of Indonesia, as you know, in 1998, we had multidimensional crisis, ethnic riots, deep economic crisis, political revolutions. And where we stand today looking back, it's actually quite amazing what Indonesia had achieved in terms of having a functioning democracy. And so far, we have been living harmoniously, but we should not forget that if we look at the historical rhythm, these big ethnic tensions happen every 25 or 30 years. And we are in the 34th year, right? No, 24th year.
Yes,
24th
not
year.
quite there.
No, 24th year, sorry. So I think the one of the success stories, I think, is the democratization. The fact that any politicians and any business today have to really think and have to be sensitive about how do we actually contribute and enable the bottom of the pyramid, the mass market, to have a better life. So Indonesia, since 1998, we now have universal healthcare that's working. Not too many people know about this. And the President Jokowi had created all kind of programs. We gave, the government gave direct subsidies or direct cash transfers to village level for them to do their own development. And I can talk on and on and on. But I think that's been a major learning for all of us, that at the end of the day, if the country wants to do well, the whole society has to prosper.
Common strand, and thank you, Patrick. A common strand that I heard in both Patrick and Melvyn's comments just then is the importance of stable, robust, and also transparent governance as a way of sustaining and providing for the environment in which businesses can thrive and flourish. So I guess the question I have for you, Patrick, as a follow-up is, you're all successful entrepreneurs on this panel. When you're dealing with the state, when you're dealing with the government, what are some of the tips or observations that you found useful in terms of the obstacles, the challenges, but also, perhaps ways of overcoming these challenges when it comes to dealing with the government and political actors? Because after all, businesses are businesses, governments are governments. That's the ideal model that we're told in sort of Business School 101. Not that I've ever been to business school. But at the end of the day, the real world is more complex than that. And I guess the question here is, especially within the Southeast Asian context, how can businesses navigate this complex political quagmire with aplomb and success? So I'm going to throw the question back at you, Patrick.
I learned a lot from this wise gentleman by the name of Robert Kwok. And he always taught us that, again, it's the same what I just said. If you want to prosper, the country has to prosper. And you need to realize that there are not that many good, talented politicians out there. And when you spot exceptional individuals, you need to do whatever you can to support them, right? And I think that is one thing. How do we actually create a network of people who are capable and have the integrity and have the willingness to serve in the government. So if we look back, at least the two previous presidents, Indonesia has been lucky that we have leaders that have really the desire to move the country forward, right? And I think that is the most important thing, is the leadership, and how do we actually create the next batch of leaders. And in my experience, once you have like these good leaders, then it's easier to have meaningful conversations. And we need to make sure that we align our business interests with the government interests. Obviously, a lot of the social programs need funding. So tax, of course, tax revenue is important. That's always been a tension. Of course, business always wants tax to be not a heavy burden for us, but at the same time, we need to realize that governments do need tax revenues. So there's always that healthy balance. But in general, I think in our businesses, because we focus on the mass market, we realize that as all these social programs, all these initiatives actually also benefit us. So I'll give you an example, live example at this moment. The incoming government has announced that they are going to provide lunch to every school, every student in Indonesia, right? And this is a controversial program because it would cost the government $30 billion a year to feed these students. And we went to try to understand this. We went to the pilot program that the incoming government is running. And we realized that the budget, by the way, is $1 per meal, per kid. But we realized that a lot of the kids in Indonesia, especially in the rural areas, they have been living with less than 5 cents a day on on meal and basically their meal budget. So having this, suddenly having this free meal provided to them makes a lot of difference. And actually the math is such that if the new government can introduce this, can execute this, extreme poverty is gone overnight in Indonesia. But it costs a lot of money, right? Where do we create $30 billion? But at the same time, the government has been spending a lot of money in subsidizing fuel, subsidizing electricity and whatnot. So there has to be a big rationalization about how subsidy works. But this creates opportunity for people like us. We would imagine that the most effective way to help the people is to have a direct transfer. Instead of like subsidizing, we would argue that instead of subsidizing the fuel, subsidizing the electricity by making the rates artificially low, you're better off to send the money directly to the poor, right? And how do you effectively do that? Then you need to use electronic wallets, and we are one of the leaders, so that would benefit us, right? And we have food delivery business, and how do we actually mobilize our network to help them and whatnot? But this requires a lot of work, a lot of redesigning of our infrastructures and whatnot. But because we believe that this will help the society, and we believe that this also creates a business opportunity, we are investing time and effort in trying to figure this out.
Thank you, Patrick. What I'm hearing from you is the importance of sound, strong leadership, which Presidents SPY and also Choi and hopefully President-elect Papaka Prabowo would also be able to provide the country with. And now turning over to you, Melvyn, of course, Indonesia and Myanmar are very different countries in terms of leadership, leadership styles, governance structures, or the degree of structure in the government, and also stability. So, when put in the context of Myanmar, right, what are the challenges and opportunities you see in dealing with the government as well as other miscellaneous stakeholders that are not the government but are nevertheless quite powerful and relevant in that context?
Yeah, I think Myanmar has not had the luck of having good leaders, and I think that probably went back a few decades, unfortunately. So from our perspective, we should be forgiven for being somewhat skeptical about how government institutions is able to facilitate the country's growth. But having said that, we do recognize that there's a huge importance and a really big multiplier, frankly, of good governance versus bad governance. And we can see that even in the last 10, 15 years, we've gone through 3 different governments. The initial transition government that was initially military staff but stepped down to be a civilian government did exceptionally well in opening up the country and allowing for economic growth. And then subsequently, we had a couple of governments that were less good. I think the lesson that we've learned is, first of all, you do have to engage the government to understand what the directions are, because there's no point kind of going against the tide. Not that you have to cozy up or have to do anything exceptional, but if there are government directions and policies that make sense, that helps the country, I think it makes sense for private sector to support that. But even more so, I believe each company needs to have a very clear goal of what we are trying to do. So, for example, together with our leadership, we've come up with our own kind of mission of building a better Myanmar for its people. And as a result, everything that we do, from financial performance, from entering new businesses, from looking at new investments, we all look at it at the lens of, are we helping the individuals and the lives of people in Myanmar? And I think that's very important, because to the extent that we are able to build a business that allows safe transfer of funds across the bottom of the pyramid in an efficient way, affordable healthcare, affordable housing, affordable food, all of these things is not just to make money. Of course, we want to be sustainable and profitable, But if we're able to help a large part of the population, I think you almost substitute yourself into the government's role in alleviating poverty, but also just helping general life. Look, from a personal perspective, COVID and the coup has been very, very difficult. But every moment that we feel kind of upset or annoyed or even angry, we can go back to the point of, hey, look at the people that we are serving and helping. That's really, really powerful. And it's a great motivator for our staff to really keep going in difficult times. So I think my view is government plays a very, very important role. When there are strong policies that make sense and that are good, we have to do what we can to help them. In the absence of that, companies, the private sector, can play a very large role in helping lives of people.
I would now like to turn to Jesse in response to this abrupt breaking piece of news, to perhaps share with us some insights, not on social media.
It sounds like a Southeast Asian government. You changed the role midway.
Yes, but there's strong leadership from me, so I guess I compensate for that, right? Yes, so turning over to you, Jesse, we've heard two very compelling accounts of perhaps contrasting approaches to dealing with governments and governance at large. So what do you make of Vietnam? Where do you see this country as going, and evolving towards? And how do you find working with regulators, state authorities? You mentioned that you've built an education center in the University of Hanoi. What is it like working with the government in Vietnam? And are there similarities and differences between Vietnam and China?
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for the information. I will not comment really about the government, but if they're good or bad. But we do have experience. So regarding the Vietnam government, I think they learn a lot from China. As you may know, their General Secretary also visited China recently. So all the structure and how the government structure is all really similar. And also the culture. So as there's a saying in Vietnam, you make friends before you do business in Vietnam. So for us, we've been in Vietnam for more than 50 years. So how we have the relationship with the government is that we always follow the government's lead, which industry they think is good. Is it green energy, technology, or agriculture? Then we follow. But we do not stand side in the politics. So we do not say, okay, we are friends with this party, because the government cabinet, they will always change. So how we deal with the government is we follow the high level direction for the government. But in the government, there are actually many different departments. We cannot really generalize the government, because there is the ones that are maybe finance, taxation, real estate. All these have different interests, and they do different things. So for example, if they and there's also the high level government, and then there's also the medium, and also there's the bottom of the pyramid. So each government has, each person also have different interests. So how I deal is that sometimes when we cannot handle it, we find consultancies, okay? So we find help, which whoever has the connection and the know-how to do it, sometimes we are not too familiar, so we ask help. But if there's the government, they want to have more politically correct and more projects that we can help, then we facilitate. And we also, so we don't really want to say how we deal with the government, is how we cooperate with the government. So for our role, aside from a businessman, we become a platform. So we like to be the super connector as Hong Kong's role. So we open many conferences with the government. We help the China and Vietnam government to push things in the business channel, because sometimes G2G, there's a lot of many process, regulation, translation, and many steps. So as a business, as a company, we can actually deal with the different high-level governments and ask for their approval. And when both of these government, they feel it's a good for us to proceed, we would we would invite all the companies, because we have 60 years experience in Vietnam, no, 60 years in China and 50 years in Vietnam. So we have the capacity to become similar to TDC, because like TDC, they we have TINA, but ETO, they do not have an office in Vietnam. So basically, I'm also an advisor to HK, Hong Kong Business Association in Vietnam. So we, as a business association and as a company, we can help the relationship between China and Vietnam in a business company's role. And I think, therefore, we establish a really long-term relationship instead of siding with which government, good or bad. We follow Vietnam for 50 years, and the government wants us, like China, to 100 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesse. And in a moment, I'll be opening up the floor to questions, comments, and interventions from everyone. And please do start thinking about what you'd like to say, because I've got plenty of questions to ask you or to share thoughts on. But before then, I do want to ping D. You know, Sino-American relations, very light topic, very easy topic. Obviously, it's something that many of us have been thinking about: the tensions, the rivalry, the mistrust, some say misunderstanding, others say excessively robust understanding, because they know each other too well. You know, that's why China and the US are currently at loggerheads in many ways, in technology and economic rivalry and tradecraft, and even in the military and, of course, the digital spheres as well. So my question for you is, as a business whose operations had, you know, in many ways been so deeply entangled with the Sino-American rapprochement or the marriage, you know, between China and the US in many ways, how have you found the past few years, and how have you sought to navigate, again, this increasingly precarious minefield between China and the US? Is there any room for hope? Do you see hope?
So as I mentioned, you know, my family, we started studying in the US really early on, pretty much part of that first group of Chinese who went to America to study. That was my great-grandfather. My grandfather, my mother, we all studied in the US, and I grew up watching more CNN and Sesame Street than I did TVB, okay? My mother is the world's most optimistic person, and I think that is how you live through a moment of extreme change. And so my family business, Eskel, which my mother and my grandfather founded in 1978 with the opening of China to try to use manufacturing again to create better jobs. We never worked for the lowest, cheapest tier. We were always in the mid-market, which afforded us the room to pay people well, to integrate healthy and safe working conditions, to work on environmental issues starting from, you know, really the early 2000s. We've always been part of that group, right? And really, our biggest customer of Eskel was the American market. Now, in 2001, my mother, she's very visionary. And her view was in this view to create not just a product and a business and a community, her view was really so broad that she thought, how do I transform China's ability to make wonderful product? So she cut off a lot of the manufacturing we were doing in pants and sweaters, and she decided that she was going to go to Xinjiang and help develop extra long staple cotton. Over 20-odd years, she has worked in Xinjiang, Eskel has worked in Xinjiang, and I would, you know, kudos to her. I think the work Eskel's done has been transformational. Now, where this ended, what this led to was in 2001, one of our subsidiaries, a highly automated spinning mill, was put on an entity list. Now, Eskel follows, we are an early signer of the UN Global Compact. We believe, I still use this term we because it's family, but like very honestly, and you'll hear the second part of this story in a minute, I no longer work there. But at Eskel, we, and my family, we believe that every person should be treated with trust, respect, and dignity. And that when we enter a community, it is not about finding the most obvious, cheapest person to just nail the job, but about understanding how we can grow within the community and for the community. So we, for example, in Kelantan, which is a state in Malaysia, we worked with women who often had never had a job before, but we created such a safe workplace, and we tried to understand how we could serve their needs and allow for them to bring their families to allow them to work. And we figured out how to optimize our process so that they could pray 5 times a day. And we were as productive as we were in other places. That is the Eskel way. And so in Xinjiang, of course, the idea was not just to hire Han or Chinese people, but to really work with everybody who lived there in the native community, whether they were Hui or Uyghur, and try to create our own Eskel community. So even with all of this, we ended up on this entity list. And so Eskel actually had to sue the US government, not once, but twice. And both times, the courts ruled that there was no evidence that we'd done this. But the entity list is a tool of foreign policy, and although this is really not how the entity list is used, there's nothing they can do about it. Now, my mother is the world's most optimistic person. And when this happened, she is principled, she is value-driven, as in she believes, in what she's doing and in the fact that what we've done is right. We went through and we said, did we ever do anything bad? It's like, guys, here's every single HR record. And here it shows, like, this person went home. This is the program we had to teach Uyghurs Han and Han's Uyghur so that they could collaborate and talk better. Here is how we enter, Actually, we really didn't do anything wrong. So unlike many of our competitors, we're not just gonna cut loose a part of our family. And my mother said, we're gonna stand by this. But because we did, we lost half of our business. Basically, Eskel lost its entire overseas Western and American book. Now, with that, what was most sad is many of the cut and sew factories that Eskel had that served these markets were not actually in China. They were in Sri Lanka, they were in Malaysia. And sadly, these are the ones that we had to shut down. So, when great powers dance, you really don't know what the outcome is. We were providing exceptional employment in rural Xinjiang to Uyghurs and to Han and to Hui. We were providing exceptional employment to Sri Lankans, to Mauritians, to Malaysians. We were transforming the ability of women to uplift their communities and their families. And all this went away. Now, my mother is the most optimistic person in the world. And she will say, this sucks, but thank you. And why thank you? Thank you because as a person who owns a business, there's always things that you want to do, right? But when the times are good, you might not get around to doing them. So for years, my mother said, you must go out and develop our own brands. Someone must try to understand. We have so much technology. We have things around sustainability, automation. We must share this. We must commercialize it and give it to other people so that they can use it and we can help them increase productivity, right? So she says, thank you, because right now we have the impetus to go out and do this. So I started a new company. It's called Tessellation, and with my cousin. And our goals, we share one thing with Escal, and they're 2 SDGs. The SDGs we share are 8 and 12. 8 is about good employment and how how companies can help raise the standard of living. What does it mean to provide a good job? And 12 is around sustainable consumption and production. And so at Tessellation, I build brands, and this is very exciting to me because I think the linear economy is broken. I think the way we market and tell people that they should buy things for fulfillment, that is functionally wrong. The way we create product so that you can buy it, not so that it is wonderful, not so that it will serve you, that is wrong. And I think a lot of the brands in the world currently, they create an aspiration that says you are lacking and that someone else, something else, that is not a reflection of any of us, that is who we should want to be, and that is wrong. So with my brands, I hope to go out and turn this entire system on its head and try to work to create a message that is empowering, that is honest, and that serves my consumer and the environment and all the stakeholders in our communities in every single way, because the way we do business, the way we operate our business, and then the products that we give, these are the small steps that lead to the world that we live in. Around 12, we have a lot of technology, waterless dyeing, automated sewing lines. These are things we are now in the process of commercializing and moving forward. And finally, we're doing some investing, and investing only around 8 and 12. Why? Because again, this is how we believe businesses move the world forward, and where we have some know-how, where we can actually make a difference in the implementation and execution of these businesses. So Brian asks, how do I feel about geopolitics, about the Sino-US relationship? I think people look at me, they're like, you're American. You sound like American. Where were you born? California? And I'm like, dude, I'm not American, okay? I have no local American accent. I have a TV accent. I have many, many friends in America. I spent 8 years there. Some would say those are the formative years, right? Because high school, college, a liberal arts college or university, and by the way, I studied philosophy. So like, how much more indoctrinated am I? But I think at the end of the day, our roots are where they are. Our friends and our families are where they are. And the values that we hold true are ours, no matter who and where we are. The question is if we know ourselves well enough, and if when we go out, whether it is to America, to France, to Myanmar, if we have the sense of self to know who we are and to try to find that same belief that you would hold as well as a sovereign human being with a sense of purpose and humility and morality. So I think the world is hard, but I think at base, we have very much that we can connect on and that we can work together towards. And so I am scared, but I am resilient, and my mother is always optimistic.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you for those very powerful thoughts and remarks. And indeed, whenever folks ask me if I'm hopeful about the future of China, I would say never underestimate the transformative prowess and potential of 1.4 billion people. And when you think you can kneecap a country's development by imposing measures aimed at containing its access to resources and technology, be careful what you wish for, because the resilience that you inspire and that you trigger in this 1.4 billion people, it's immense. It's truly immense. And on that note, I'm going to open up the floor to the audience at large. I see Regina, Mrs. Zip has a comment, and anyone else have a comment after Regina? So a gentleman on that table over there. So I'll take Mrs. Zip first, and then the gentleman over there. Could we have a microphone for Mrs. Zip, please? I will use my. Oh, thank you very much.
Call me Regina. That makes me feel younger. You know. Thank you all for your fascinating stories. I'm truly impressed with your resilience, your optimism, and your skills in navigating all this complex environment. You know. My question has to do with how China is perceived in Southeast Asia because of the territorial disputes and because China is big. I've seen surveys which suggest fear of China. On the other hand, I've noticed from Douyin, you know, all the videos my daughter's been sharing with me, that sea drama is very popular in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand. When China's top stars arrived, they were greeted by 10,000 fans. That sort of phenomenon. So which is more influential, Confucianism or sea drama? You know, and how do you see, because China controls, its cultural products. How do you think China can make better use of its soft power to talk to the people?
Thank you very much. And we'll also take the gentleman's question very quickly before opening up to the panel for response. So over there, please.
Thank you. My name is HY, and my question for panel is about the faith in humanity. So there's a saying that, yes, we are divided by languages, by nationalities, and by our differences. But when there's a common enemy, we will learn to work together, and we will come about, and we will deliver. But when the world was faced by one of the greatest, biggest, largest health crises that took way too many innocent lives, and I'm talking about, to be clear, I'm talking about COVID, not the US gun violence, right? And that would be for another day. But yes, when the world was faced by COVID, we saw even more hostility, we saw even more polarization. And nowadays we have quote-unquote politicians saying that we just have to take care of ourselves. We don't have to work together. And it worries me a lot because when we cease to believe that we have the ability to work together, we will stop any form of meaningful conversation. And when we stop that, when we stop talking to each other, misunderstanding grows and we will lose faith in humanity. So my question for the panel is that as young leaders, what would you do to counteract those cynical ideas that I just mentioned? Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to start with Regina's question on China and Southeast Asia and soft power. May I invite actually perhaps Patrick and Jesse to respond to this question, and feel free to jump in, Melvyn and Dee, if you have any additional thoughts on that. And I'm going to assign the question on faith in humanity and how can we keep faith to tackle existential threats like climate change, pandemics, and whatnot to our other two panelists. So maybe we'll start with Patrick.
So for those who are not familiar with our history, in 1967, Suharto came to power. He toppled down President Sukarno on an accusation that the Communist Party of Indonesia at that time was staging a coup. And our Communist Party was very close to the Chinese Communist Party, was not close to the Soviet at that time. And for 32 years, there was a written policy that limited the use of Chinese language and the practice of Chinese customs. And for families like mine, we changed our family name from Chinese to Indonesian, as most of my fellow Chinese Indonesians did. But at the same time, the Suharto regime gave a lot of freedom for Chinese to prosper in commerce. There was limitations. In my generation, it was known that we could not join the government, we could not join the military, and so on, right? And it's convenient for me to blame my inability to speak Chinese because of this policy. So the American influence was very strong at the time, and the other difference is that there is also a religious differences, right? The Chinese in Indonesia are predominantly non-Muslims, and that created another tension, if you will, and this doesn't exist in other part of Southeast Asia, I would say. Fast forward, I think and that's on the political side. On the social side, I think Chinese, over many waves of immigrations, repeat the same success stories, right? I mean, willing to work hard, more productive, safe, and all these attributes that we know. But now, on top of that, the new Chinese immigrations possess the capital, and also possess the technology, possess the know-how, right? So the potential tension, and this I share with my fellow mainland Chinese businesses that came to Indonesia, is for them to become so successful, they killed a lot of local businesses and then created a new source of tension, right? And we are already seeing this happening at this moment. Right? I mean, Indonesia recently prohibited cross-border e-commerce. And with the view that import is still allowed, but you need to clear customs, you need to build your own infrastructures and whatnot. But if you sell a shirt for 50 cents, how do the local producers survive, right? So that's really the biggest challenge. And for me, my worry is that if this tension builds up and history repeats itself, it's people like us who become a victim, because there's no difference between newcomers and the Chinese Indonesians that have been there for generations. But the good thing is that for the big businesses, I think people are aware of this, and they're trying to be sensitive. But for the smaller businesses, money comes first, right? And there are many of them. So I think what I would like to say is that I'm less concerned about the government-to-government relationship. It's actually very warm because there's mutual needs. But it's the social tension that I'm concerned.
Thank you. And turning over to you, Jesse, and I want to home in on Regina's point about soft power. Obviously, culture, Confucian heritage, legacy, these are all instrumental pillars and parts of China's, not just image abroad, but also our own cultural ethos. To what extent do you see, however, China's soft power as lagging or struggling in Vietnam, if at all? Or do you see it as actually doing pretty well? And on that front, what more could China do, both in terms of the state and also private businesses?
Maybe I first give you context between Vietnam and China, right? So we have the dispute in the seas. So because of that, we have the problem of the visa, because for China passport, they have the map in the passport, and when the Vietnamese, they see the map, they disagree. So when they disagree, they refuse to stamp. So there was a period of the time that it's really difficult for Chinese to get the visa to Vietnam, and therefore, so there's some difficulties. And also in 2015, there was the time when the Vietnam government actually gave some enterprise big pieces of land for 99 years lease. And that time, the local Vietnamese feels that the government is selling their own country to China. So at that time, they have all the riots, and anything with Chinese words has been vandalized and whatnot. So for our business, we were also there, and we forced ourselves to take out our Chinese letters. But fortunately, for example, in our coffee business, the motorcyclists were like surrounding our factory. But however, we had one American and one French manager that was managing the factory. So luckily, we were safe because they did not see any Chinese back then. And in our CBD in the Sunwah Tower, luckily we built that in 1997. And I think some Vietnamese even confuse our name to be Korean. So I think it's fortunately we are safe from the riot. But at that time, when the government, they feel it's out of control, when they want to stop it, it's similar to China. They have the capability of stopping riots. So back to the point of the soft power. I think Chinese in Vietnam do not have much soft power compared to Koreans and Japanese, because you know we are bordering nation. So bordering nation have history of wars and invasions and all these things. So because of the history, Vietnam is smaller than China, right, in size. So they are particularly careful. So many really national security things, because they know China have lots of money, right? If they invest in like GBA is already like bigger than Vietnam, just GBA, right? Not the whole China. So they are really careful. If you have lots of money, you come in and buy my ports, buy my telecom and everything, then basically a lot of key assets would be in the hands of the Chinese. So there's always all these national security. They would not allow maybe Chinese to hold, and therefore, and also there are Chinese communities and schools that you see many different international schools, but you do not see Chinese international school. So education is also really important. And also really for Vietnam. So the government is really careful on how to work with the Chinese. So I think for us, we stand as a Hong Kong company, China, Hong Kong. So we become the bridge to the, because actually Vietnam, somehow they feel that Hong Kong is a really good special administrative region to work. They treat Hong Kong slightly different from China. So for our business association, we try to voice, and also sometimes we try to represent China to have some talks with the Vietnam government. And we have a really special role, since aside from Chinese, we can also speak English, so we get treated differently. But for the Chinese Business Association, we are also a member, and we try to do things in small ways, like not small ways, but in donations to schools and help the locals. But I think we need to do more marketing to show that we are doing good for the Vietnamese community. So it's not just we are doing business, but of course, for the Vietnamese who have good Chinese partners, because you should know that Chinese is the biggest trading partner. And also, although they are the sixth FDI in Vietnam, but a lot of Chinese, they go through Singapore, BVI, and Hong Kong. And of course, we have Taiwan to Vietnam. So therefore, actually, I think China is there's a lot of Chinese FDI through different channels to Vietnam. So I think if for the Vietnamese who have good Chinese partners, I think they can feel the warmth of the Chinese and really similar in culture. And actually, especially for the North, a lot of Vietnamese feels that actually China is really good. But of course, when there's a bad apple, when the Chinese, they make some mistakes, like one company, then it's in the news. Everyone knows. But if maybe some Japanese company or Korean has some mistakes, it's just it's not really a matter. So I think for us, we need to do more culture or more donations and more marketing to show on the activities that we contribute to Vietnam. And I think generally for the soft power, that is what we should do. But of course, the relationship is always really difficult to solve. And as for the business side, we can, of course, continue to uphold our Hong Kong standards to make sure we do not cut costs and have low quality products to the Vietnamese. So then they would, it takes time, it takes time. This is not a one day thing to solve, but I think this is our solution. Thank you.
Absolutely, and actually, Jesse, what you said there highlights a broader point about the importance of Hong Kong's soft power as well. You know, how we fit into the picture, given that in Canto Pop, we've got the 4 heavenly kings, and actually, whenever you go down to Southeast Asia, you'd hear folks blasting Andy Lau or Aaron Kwok on a radio, and you'd hear, you know, them talking about movies produced by Hong Kong producers, Hong Kong actors and actresses. You know, we've got, for instance, Leon Lai or Michelle Yeoh, who's terrific in her own right as an embodiment of Hong Kong, Malaysian, and in general, pride of Asia as well. And these are all assets, not assets per se, but demonstrations and signs of Hong Kong's incredible and enduring soft power and allure in Southeast Asia. And I'll move on to you, Dee, very shortly on Michelle Yeoh. But before then, I do want to sort of raise the question with you, Patrick, on a question of faith and keeping hope. It's not been easy. How do we do it? What's the recipe?
Well, that's a tough question. I'll answer that. Can I just go back to the soft power a bit first? We experience it in Myanmar too. In fact, the words, the phrase soft power drives me mad. Because if you look at when US was, of course, having a very important role in the global scene, if you look at Japan reaching out to many countries, they never name what they do as soft power, as influence. But they do it. Of course, there's a reason behind why they're doing it. But they do it because of influence, but they don't name it. The fact that in Hong Kong, China, etc., as China try to impose more influence on the world, we phrase it as soft power. But actually, that's from a country's perspective, particularly a smaller country, that's very threatening. Because from my perspective, in looking at how Myanmar deals with China, I think it's a bit at a loss. We've always had a very good relationship with China. At the same time, we've always been a bit scared. We have a long border, you know, and any country with a long border, you're kind of thinking, well, we need to be friends, because if we're not, we get invaded. Yeah? And even if it's not official invasion, where there's illicit trade going across the border, skirmishes at the border area, it causes a lot of problems. So there's a lot of willingness to reach out and engage China. But at the same time, many of the Chinese projects, particularly now, is focused on Belt and Road, which should be a great thing. You know, we're helping countries or helping people build infrastructure and maybe subsidizing some of this development as well. But unfortunately, it's a bit too much viewed as China's project and a means to China's goal of connecting the world to China. And as a result, either there's a lot of demand on it, or in fact, there's a lot of rejection of these plans. I think, in my view, the overall approach of foreign affairs, but also particularly on the economic side, probably needs a bit of kind of almost an overhaul to explore how we can use this soft power in a more subtle way. Maybe it is some donation, maybe something more subtle. Maybe it's actually, as you said, more cultural. But we have to also understand that many people don't really know China. There are not that many people in Southeast Asia who's actually been to China or has a deep understanding of China. So they read what is in the press, and sometimes that can be a bit scary. But going back to the question on faith in humanity, I would have thought that in the last 3-4 years, having gone through all the things that we're going, we should all have a lot more faith. At least from my perspective, we've gone through COVID, which is devastating for Myanmar. We went through a coup, which is even worse, and we are still standing. I think that in itself gives me some faith. It's tough for a lot of people, and I think it's helpful to. I always go back to the individual lives, right? I've mentioned this a few times. We're impacting lives, because when you go too grand, you lose a bit of the touch of kind of what this is all about. When you look at a livelihood of a family, of a person, how they've been impacted in these situations and how they're trying to recover or sustain themselves, I think it gives me some faith that actually humanity goes through these phases of difficulties all the time, and we figure out a way to get over it. So we can go through individually the geopolitics, the many other issues, but personally, I think we just go through phases. And maybe the next phase is 30, 40 years of turbulence. I think we had a dress rehearsal with a lot of sharp changes in the last 3-4 years. I personally don't think that's the end of it. I don't think that was a difficult time and we're now up for a good time. In fact, I think that's a rehearsal for even tougher times ahead. But that's kind of life.
You mentioned phases, and I think of the three-body problem, actually. The role played by phases there. And moving on to D, what gives you faith in the face of challenges like the rise of potential artificial general intelligence, AGI, geopolitical intrigue and tensions, food crises? What do we do?
It's so interesting. I mean, these between the 2 questions and the 3 responses, there's so many different threads that I want to capture. I mean, I guess, in reverse order, what gives me faith? I understand what you mean. And, it's like, and I think the point is not, will people be alive in 100 years, right? That's not the question. Humanity, of course, isn't going to exist. But it's like, what gives you the belief that there are people who want to promote in a generous manner and with a generous spirit, right? So what gives you hope and faith that we are not all just self-interested? So I believe in international institutions. I think one of the things we've seen the biggest and most painful degradation of in the last few years are these institutional institutions, the ones, whether it's the UN, the WTO, and you could argue maybe they didn't really work that well in the beginning, and now they're just showing what they are for real. But the truth is, if we don't give them the respect that they deserve, we will kill them, okay? So you ask me, how do I keep the faith? That's the answer, right? The word is faith. We don't know if it's true or false. It's faith. But we know that if we do not act as though it is true, then we will bring about its real demise. I think about this discussion we've had about why people see China as scary, as an enemy. And I think back to my personal experience opening stores in Hong Kong. And we opened, in the last year, maybe 6, 7 stores. And, write a budget, beginning of the year, and it's like, hey, what happened to your January sales? You're off budget by like 50%. Everybody's going to Shenzhen. And the answer is, so where I'm going with this is business, being in business is being trained live. It's the Hunger Games, okay? And things happen hard and fast. And that is the real world. Yesterday, we heard a panel about great power competition, and the question was ideology or interests. And I think the question is, the point of having faith is to believe that your interest and my interest align, and even when there are moments of disruption, no matter how sharp they are, we need to find a way to remember that I may need to try to make sure I survive today, but our interests are actually the same, because for a better tomorrow, I must get better and you must get better. Now, part of the problem I see comes down to, hyper-liberal capitalism and how we've created a world where the market and the concept of more is what we all believe in. And when that is the case, the world, everything becomes a zero-sum game, and all the added benefits are hoarded. They're not shared, right? So I think the answer is, the world is scary. And at any moment when the going gets tough, I may have to hurt you so I get hurt a little less. But if we can find a way through culture, through our actions, and that actions that may often seem the opposite of self-interested in the short term, but again, if we can just find that little extra to share, then we try to create a relationship that allows us to weather for the long term. And I think this goes back to the soft power question. So what I always find really interesting is if you watch the Olympics, right, it's like, oh, I won, you won, who won, But then what you see on the sides are all the athletes, like hugging and shaking hands and cheering for each other. And these athletes, because we only watch the Olympics, but they go to the Worlds, they go to the regionals, they go to the Asian Games, they go to this. They've actually grown up together. And what they have is mutual respect and admiration. They are adversaries, but they understand and respect what they do, and they have love of the sport, and therefore, no matter who wins or loses, they have elevated the game through their competition. And I think, soft power, TV dramas, all of this, I think it's great. Because I think it normalizes, street signs, it normalizes the basic ways in which we think. It brings us a little bit closer. But does it actually lead to a space where we can have mutual, so it's the beginning of mutual connection. But does it allow us to have admiration and respect? Not enough. So the question is, we should do all of these things. We should donate more, but we shouldn't do it for the sake of soft power. We should do it because we have faith, and because we have belief, and because we actually are in it so that we can make a better world for me and for you, because only together does that work. And I think climate is the most obvious one. It's like, I can have all the solar panels I want. You melt the glaciers, I'm screwed. So, I think that's really the big question, is how do we remember, like, the times are tough, and they really are, but just because they are, it doesn't, like, my job as an entrepreneur is to react, is to hold my position, but also to react. So I've lost my foot traffic. Okay, well, how do I deal with it? It's not say, shut the border. It's not say, something really asinine, like give me a handout on my, it just doesn't really make sense. I think we're so scared we're asking. But the question, again, is really more of how can we be actors? How can we be energetic? How can we believe that we have the ability to make betterment, right? And I hope that sort of ties all of this together.
It really does, Dee. It really does. And on that, I'm going to open up the floor to another round of comments and questions and remarks as we near the end of this session. But before that, I do want to do a straw poll, an interactive one with everyone here participating, including those of you standing up. And the first question is, hands up if you're optimistic about the future of the world that we're living in, if you're optimistic.
That's great.
And if you're pessimistic? Okay. Hands of you are optimistic about the future of China, our country. Okay. And finally, hands of you are optimistic about the future of Hong Kong. I think this is the most united I've seen the room apart from a... Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So this is the right audience. I mean, this is the right place for the audience. There we go. Look, the past few years haven't been easy on us, and many have often asked, you know, is Hong Kong, well, some say Hong Kong's finished, others say Hong Kong's over. But I would say, and I hope you'd agree with me, that Hong Kong is enduring, Hong Kong is persevering, and Hong Kong remains by far the most open and dynamic and cosmopolitan part of China. And on that note, I'd like to invite the floor to contribute their thoughts and comments on this very question, not necessarily in Hong Kong per se, but on what keeps you going and what makes you hopeful about the future, before I invite the panelists to comment on Hong Kong, which is a home to us all. But before then, any comments and remarks? If not, I might invite some of you to share your thoughts. So I'll have to call upon you, like Kin Chan for an... Oh, the gentleman over there, and also Kin Chan, if that's all right. Yes, I'm going to do what Henny did to you yesterday.
A very good morning to everyone, and thanks to the panel for very inspiring and interesting discussions. Because when it comes to the questions about Hong Kong, because I've been here for 13 years, which is quite a long time. And when I arrived here, I wasn't expecting that I'll be staying here quite long, because before I had never been to Hong Kong before. And when I arrived here, I said, maybe I'll just stay here for 1 or 2 years, and then I move on to other countries, because I like traveling. I just want to explore the world. But when I arrived in 2012, I just thought that, Hong Kong is quite an interesting place. So maybe I'll just stay here 1 year, and then I move somewhere to Japan or to the Middle East. And but since then, I've been here, and I've been enjoying it. And if I'm here, it means that it has lots of opportunities. And, because the thing is, Hong Kong is such a very, an interesting and ideal place for anyone to live here. Either you can do anything that you want. You can do any business. You can work in. You can have different backgrounds. You can be a teacher. You can be a journalist, or you can be anything that you want. And I think Hong Kong has all opportunities for anyone to run business, to live here. Of course, there are some challenges that we are all aware. But what I like about Hong Kong, it's about its geographical location and also all the opportunities. And for example, it helped me to save lots of time. You can attend lots of events on a one single day. But in other places, like if you're in a very big cities like, for example, London, Moscow, or any other cities, that you might just spend maybe just a couple of hours attending one meeting, but you don't have that sort of luxury to travel and attend other meetings. And I think there are lots of things to do, and I think Hong Kong is also diverse in terms of different nationalities, ethnic groups living here. But of course, it would be great to make it even more diverse, bringing more kind of diverse talent. That's what I've been, vocal more about, that we need more diverse from different cultural backgrounds, from different religious backgrounds, to make it more diverse. Because recently I traveled to Dubai, and I was quite impressed to look at how diverse actually United Arab Emirates. Because if you look at the local Emirates, it just only comprise 10% of the local population. But I think it would be great if we're able to hear lots of languages, spoken here, and also it would be great. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And there's also a hand over there. So 2 hands, actually. So I'll take those 2 hands. 3 hands. Kin, I might have to omit you this time round, if that's okay with you. Fantastic, you've been relieved. So the 3 hands on these 2 tables, please, if you could just introduce yourselves, if you'd like, in the order. So we'll start with the gentleman there, and the lady there, and the lady on the table at the front. So over to you.
Hi, my name is Kai, and thank you very much for your sharing. I think your stories are wonderful. Referring to Brian's question about me being an optimistic about the futures of Hong Kong, my background is that I am a lawyer, so of course I'm going to talk from a legal perspective. there's a lot of comparisons between Hong Kong and Singapore. You know, there's always a rivalry between these two cities. To me, is that I think Hong Kong has a better future, and also it runs a better legal system than Singapore, especially in the long run. It is because Hong Kong is always a window for foreign businesses and companies to do business with Chinese businesses. And recently, I have a lot of clients that they are Chinese, like Chinese background, from Shanghai, from Beijing, and most of them, they ask me this question. They say, hey, my dear lawyer, should I choose the governing law of this contract based on Hong Kong law or Singaporean law? And I said, you know, it's really up to you, but my real suggestion is that put it under Hong Kong. One of the key reasons is that, let's say there's a dispute between a US company and a Chinese company, like what D was facing. Then it comes to a point that it has to be resolved in the court. And to me, is that our Chinese counterparts or Chinese clients has a very confident, you know, they really believe in the common law system, but they also think about easy travels. You know, coming to Hong Kong is just, you know, getting over the Shenzhen River. And also, the court system in Hong Kong is, especially on the commercial side, is quite liberal, and it also, you know, gives out very bright, very you know, commercialized judgments, comparing to our Singaporean counterparts, which the Singaporean court is really working under the regime. So you know, this is what I tell my clients as well. But of course, the panel might disagree. And also, there's a recent story. A friend from Japan came to visit, and she asked me this question. She said, "Oh, how do you feel about the capitalism or the liberal environment for businesses in Hong Kong?" So I said, "You know what? Let me take out a Hong Kong dollar." And I said, look at who printed the $100 of the banknote. And she discovered that it's printed not by the Hong Kong government, but is by a private bank. So I said, hey, you know, there is nowhere in this world, probably except Ireland and Scotland, that banknotes are printed by private banks.
Would you have a question? All good, all good.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. Just in the interest of time, that's all. I love your sharing. It's fantastic.
Okay, yes. So you know, this is why I really believe in the Hong Kong the Hong Kong future. I do have a question, but I know time is running out, so I'll pass the mic to someone else.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Thank you for keeping to time. Thank you. So I'll invite the lady there to follow up with a question.
Thank you very much.
No. You're third.
Sorry.
No, all good.
Yeah. So my name is Elena Lilieva. Yes. So first of all, I'm deeply, deeply grateful for Gina for inviting me and for Keen to arranging the whole invitation. And thank you very much for the wonderful panelists here who are, I'm very, very impressed by Hong Kong and by Southeast Asia. Thank you so much for sharing this personal story, because I have been managing wealth of Eastern Europeans for almost 20 years, and some of families who are close to me were put on those entity lists only because they were staying by their employees, and they didn't flee the country, and they actually were there for their people. Yeah, I have a question to Melvyn and to Jesse, yeah, and obviously to the whole panel. So I was part of the banking and financial system of the West, yeah, for almost 20 years. I work and live in London, and I worked for HSBC for 10 years. Do you see the emergence of the new financial system? And do you think it is possible to avoid some of the major currencies? Yeah, because obviously you both have the banking institutions in your holdings. Yeah, so do you think it is possible at all to build a new world, a new financial system in the world? Thank you.
Thank you. Just hold your thought. I'll return to the panel shortly before, after taking the last comment. Thank you very much, Lena. And I'll take the last comment from this lady at the front.
Hi, I'm Janice, and actually, I think it's a question, not a comment. Comments from me. I understand that Jesse has some experiences in Cambodia, a place where not many people visit or travel or know about. So could I ask Jesse to compare Vietnam and Cambodia in terms of business opportunities and cultures and their relationship with China? Could you do that?
Thank you very much. So, seeing as we only have time for closing remarks, I'm going to impose a challenge and a rule. If each of you could keep your remarks to around 90 seconds, I know it's tough, and in these 90 seconds, you will address the future of Hong Kong, the role of Hong Kong and China, the future of the world. We're not heading towards a more pluralistic financial and also currency order, and also comparison between Cambodia and Vietnam in relation to Sino-Vietnamese and Sino-Cambodian relations. As we can tell, very feasible. So we're going to try our best, because the time has run out already. So I'm going to just keep strict time limits for each of our wonderful, wonderful panelists. So I'm going to start first, perhaps, with Jesse. And then we'll go in that order in roughly 90 seconds each. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian. Just for clarification, we don't have banking. We don't have banks in our portfolio, only fund management. Regarding to Janice's question, to compare Vietnam and Cambodia is basically Cambodia is really welcoming Belt and Road. As you know, the infrastructure between Phnom Penh and Sihanoukville, 2 hours, built by the subsidiary of Zhongjiao, Luqiao. They built that road, and it really connects the CBD with the port. So for Cambodia, basically, they welcome Chinese. They're really open, and right now the new cabinet is speak English, so no translated needed, the ministers right now. And they all really want Cambodia to flourish. The only thing is the market. Basically, Cambodia is, the population is really small because of historical reasons, the Khmer Rouge. That's why they face some internal demand challenges. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. That was impressive. That was just 1 minute. Thank you so much, Jesse. Thank you. Thank you. May I now invite Dee?
I think, we're like wired to be scared. And so pessimism is the sexiest and most obvious, way forward. Like everybody's always like, this is the end. And I think though, if we're able to look clearly at what we have, what is around, the truth is nowhere is perfect and the entire world is going through a lot of change. And when people normally look forward with doom and gloom, what you read are these projections like, oh, in X amount of time, this is gonna happen, it's over. And this amount of time, what people tend to not know how to put into those predictions are the powers of technology that have yet emerged. And so I think if we, again, have a sense of purpose, if we have a sense of humanity, if we recognize that fear is the natural state, but that it is not the only state, then there are a lot of opportunities, but we have to be able to stand up and run towards them, not shy away from them.
Thank you very much, Dee. Patrick?
Just want to make some comments about Singapore versus Hong Kong, because I am very familiar with Singapore, work very closely with GIC, with Temasek, and with the whole Singapore government. So I think two things. One is that the strength of Singapore is that it is not China. The strength of Hong Kong is that it is China. And you should play on that strength. And you don't have to try to be somebody else, right? And that's one thing. The second thing is that Singapore government is a well-run and one of the best corporations in the world, period. The talents that they attract and the investment that they make in the civil service is second to none. And if I can make an observation, that is where Hong Kong government has to up its game. You have not done a good job in marketing yourself overseas. You have not done a good job in establishing personal relationships with leaders in the region. In if you see Southeast Asia is important, act that way, right? And so, and we heard about all these relationships and so forth, and also be strategic about it. During COVID, I just give you one example, okay? During COVID, the Singapore government gave me a pass to be able to travel to Singapore in and out without quarantine. I could not travel to Hong Kong for 3 years, right? That is one difference.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Patrick. And finally, the last word goes to Melvyn.
So quick answer to the question. I do believe an alternative or other options are being developed for the banking system, although we have to recognize that US-based, US dollar-based banking system is the predominant one. But I strongly believe that alternatives will come up. I would echo Patrick's view that Hong Kong's strength is China, and that's a huge strength. We really don't need to think of Singapore as a competitor, and Singapore has a strength that is different. We just play to different audiences. I also believe that Hong Kong has a great future, but Hong Kong will change like every single country. And it's important for Hong Kong to embrace that change. As Hong Kong reach out to develop relationship with Southeast Asia, with other countries, etc., I think Hong Kong itself is just a component of China. So it has to play on the fact that it is part of China. It's a reliable partner to enter or to do business in China, but it is part of China. So that we have to leverage on that. Myanmar went through ups and downs, right? There were periods where everyone was coming to Myanmar. And the interesting thing was everyone would tell me that, oh, Myanmar is so important, Southeast Asia is so important. Sitting here, I feel Hong Kong is saying the same thing to Southeast Asia, but remember, every single trading bloc is saying the same thing. So what is our differentiation? I think that's what we would need to think about.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Melvyn. Hong Kong's value rests with its organic distinctiveness from the mainland, whilst remaining firmly and critically a constituent of China, which is currently the second largest and perhaps sooner rather than later, the largest economy in the world, not just in PPP terms, but also nominal terms. On that note, I want to take the opportunity to thank all of our wonderful panelists, Jesse, Dee, Patrick, and Melvyn, for their incredible contributions. I want to thank all of you for your time and also your patience. And of course, above all, I would like to thank Regina for incredible leadership and again, putting together this youth-centered panel, which I do hope has injected some energy and zest into the rest of the day. So thank you all very much. Thank you.